Hi, I'm Leon, Managing Director of Engineering for Resilient Coders. And what that means is that you're in the classroom with myself and three other wonderful experts in residence. And so this video is meant to give you a taste of what it might be like to be in our classroom together and to answer a lot of your common questions that we see about joining the Resilient Coders Bootcamp. So we're going to start off by answering some of the most common questions, and then we're going to move into a quick primer on HTML and a little bit of CSS, and the goal is for you to be able to have a lot of your common questions answered, but also have some skills that you can take into the next part of the interview process, which is our hackathon, where you'll come together in groups to build a wonderful project. So let's jump right into it, and let's kind of talk about some of the things that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about software engineering as a career. I'm going to answer your questions, like I said, about the program. We're going to cover how to learn, right? One of the most important things we teach at Resilient Coders is actually how to learn. We make sure that by the time you leave the program, once you join your company, that you have the skills that you need to skill up in any technology that you might need to be able to skill up in very quickly. The other wonderful thing is that most of us weren't really taught how to learn, myself included. I think it's kind of criminal, the fact that I wasn't taught about active recall, spaced repetition, the things that enable your brain to remember information for the long haul. So we always have to start off with learning how to learn. We're going to talk about the client server model. The client server model is basically how the internet works. And then we're going to do a kind of practice building of a simple website together. We're going to talk about the basics of HTML, its structure, its syntax. And I'm going to wrap up with just a smidge of CSS so that when you join us for that second part of the program, you can put these skills into practice. So, always like to start off with kind of the common questions. Resilient Coders is a 20-week software engineering bootcamp where you can go from zero kind of technical skills to employed. We accept individuals typically in the ranges of 18 to 30, all folks of color, mainly folks that do not have degrees, but those are not hard requirements. So if you don't fall within those bounds, still please apply. It is an intensive program. It's 20 weeks, but it really is 12 hours a day, every day for 20 weeks. No weekends, really no breaks. It is intense because we really do want you to go from zero skills to having a job. And if you look at our last year's cohorts, the individuals that graduated, we had a 100% placement rate and an average salary of $92,000. So the individuals that are making it through our program are getting phenomenal jobs. If you make it through the program, you're getting a job, and it's a program that will help you go from, like I said, zero technical skill to having the skills that are in demand. They're going to help you get a high-paying, happy career. So, with that being said, we would like to talk a little bit about the why. Like, why does Resilient Coders exist? Why are we? Why does this nonprofit exist? And why do we ask you to commit those 20 weeks that are grueling 12-hour a day weeks? Well, we started off in Boston, and when you look in our communities of color, we saw double-digit unemployment rates. Right? The rhetoric was that there was a 2.4% unemployment rate. When you looked in our communities of color, it was double digits. And so, how do we exist in the second largest tech economy outside of the Valley, yet still have double digit unemployment rates for our folks of color? And what we realized is that there was a disconnect between what these companies want and the skills that may be in those communities of color. And so, our goal is to take individuals from those communities, give them the skills that they need to unlock those jobs that are high paying in a high growth career. And if we kind of extrapolate on that, there are some other things that are just kind of scary going around as well. When you look at the jobs that our communities rely on, they're actively being engineered away. So when you look at the number one job for a black male, which is driver, and you think about all the companies trying to get self-driving cars and self-driving trucks on the road. In fact, we have TuSimple that already has self-driving trucks on the road. So the number one job that our communities rely on for black males is actively being engineered away. Look at the #1 job for Black females, retail associate, actively being engineered away. I cannot tell you the last time I talked to a human being at CVS. You go in, you scan your items, you're out. You go to McDonald's, you're talking to a kiosk, not a cashier. So the jobs that our women of color rely on are actively being engineered away. And so you have to stop and think. If we're already at double-digit unemployment and the jobs that the individual in our community rely on are actively being engineered away, how do we survive? And that's where RC comes in. We figured out how to help folks gain the skills that they need to be employable in this new economy, especially in the cities where we reside, Boston, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh. And so for us, it is a completely free program. You will never pay us a dime. There's no way to give us money. We are a nonprofit. But what you do pay in is once you get that job, you turn around and you bring 3 more people with you. It's the only way that we can survive this onslaught that is taking over. And so what we have to do is come together to make sure that our communities of color have access to these skills, that they have access to these resources, so that we can make sure that we have high paying, high growth jobs. So at Resilient Coders, that's what we've done for the past 5 years. If you look at our previous cohorts, we've been very successful at getting folks those jobs. We want the same thing for you. So this video is kind of a quick dip into the world of software engineering, giving you a glimpse of what it might be like to join the program, to go through the program, to be in the classroom with me every day. But I hope it's also maybe a spark, something that might make you think about, all right, how can I unlock some of these high growth careers, these high growth jobs? And we're here to help. Regardless if you continue on with the interview process or not, feel free to send us emails, to reach out to us. We want to help you on your journey. Okay. Let's talk about software engineering as a career. Right now, software engineering is a high paying job. The average right now in the US is 92,000. And if you look at the listings of the happiest careers and you look at them for like the past 5 years, there's always some sort of developer role on there, an engineering role, developer role. And so you're talking about, wait a minute, a high paying job that's happy. It doesn't require a degree and you can learn it for free. And there might be a slide in your office. That's pretty cool. So if it's high paid, happy, no degree, you can learn it for free. Why isn't everyone doing this? And the truth is because it's very, very hard. Going through the trough of sorrow is a very difficult, tiresome journey. A lot of folks that start out learning how to code do not make it. And the reason why a lot of folks don't make it is because they don't have a community that supports them through this journey. And so one of the biggest things that's going to help you make it through the trough of sorrow, going from kind of 0 skills to being employed, is the fact that you're going to have amazing experts and residents in the classroom with you every day, an amazing alumni and mentor community that wants to see you be successful. So if you've tried to code before in the past and haven't made it through the trough of sorrow, this community will help you get it through it this time around. There are 3 other big things that kind of come up a lot when we're talking about adults learning how to code. And there's kind of 3 things that really stop most people from being successful. And it all comes down to managing your frustration, being consistent, and taking care of yourself. So there's a study that came out that looked at adults trying to learn languages and become fluent in those languages. And what they originally thought was that adults kind of just lose the ability to be fluent. And what they found out through this study is that actually that happens way later than we thought. And that it really comes down to folks being adults and kind of being able to run their own life and not being able to manage their frustration when things are really difficult or things aren't clicking. They can just stop, right? It's not a student that's in school that's forced to show up. And so that first key is managing your frustration is really important. And a beautiful thing that helps you manage your frustration is a community that supports you through that frustration. The second thing is being consistent. We are condensing 4 years of computer science education into 20 weeks. The only way you make it through that brutal of a schedule is if you're consistent. We're talking daily practice, minimum. You're in the classroom from 10 to 3. And then you also have hours of homework and things to get done outside of that classroom time. You cannot have a secondary job while you're going through this program. We really do need all your focus because we're connecting 4 years into 20 weeks. We actually do provide a stipend while you go through the program. It's $1,000 every 2 weeks. You're not going to get rich off of it, but we hope that it stems the bleeding as you go through the program. So managing frustration, you have a community to help with that, being consistent so that you can learn all the material that you need to learn. And then the last thing is taking care of yourself. Yes, we work hard. Yes, we put in a lot of hours. We take breaks. We get good sleep. We make sure that we're going to be able to do this for the rest of our careers. And so if you only take a few things away from today and maybe you don't continue on the process, which is completely okay, I hope that if you want to learn how to code, you keep these 3 things in mind: that you should manage your frustration, you should be consistent, and you should find ways to take care of yourself so that you can get across that finish line. And above all, don't let your dreams be dreams. Resilient Coders is a highly competitive bootcamp. We have hundreds of candidates for each cohort that all could be amazing fits for RC, but we can only take 60 a cohort. So if you don't continue on the process or you don't make it to the next round, please don't take that as an indicator of our perceived aptitude or your ability to do this. We really do believe that you can learn this stuff, that you can do this. It's just that when we put together a cohort, sometimes it's not always the right fit. So we definitely welcome you to try again and to seek out resources to continue on your journey as well. So don't let your dreams be dreams, and always reach out if you need some help. All right. 2 most important things we're going to cover today that are not technical. These are active recall and spaced repetition. When I first learned this stuff, I was angry. I was angry that no educator had ever taught these things to me, that it wasn't the first page in every textbook I've ever read. But these 2 techniques will actually help you to learn how to code. If you just put these 2 things into practice, you will be able to achieve things that you might not have ever achieved before academically. So, active recall is the idea of once you learn something, you literally say out loud to yourself the things that you just learned. Okay. So here's a study. Ali Abdaal did a really good video on active recall that I highly recommend. So you can go to this YouTube video to watch this video. But here's a chart from their video that's just, it blows my mind. Here is an experiment where they gave groups of individuals, I think it was a chapter of a biology, let's just say a chapter of a biology textbook to read. So they read a chapter of a biology textbook, and then a week later they had a quiz on it. The individuals that read the chapter once and then took the quiz a week later sit here. Here are the individuals that reread the chapter 4 times. And then here are the individuals that read the book once and then the chapter out loud. They read the chapter once and then out loud actively recalled all the things that they just learned. So let's look at these 2 right here. Repeated study and retrieval practice. So the individuals that actively recalled, so they read the chapter once and then they just said out loud all the things that they learned, did better than the individuals that reread the chapter 4 times. Could you imagine doing a fourth of the work but getting better results? That's what active recall does. Active recall says, as you're moving through your material, stop, quiz yourself on the things that you just learned, ask yourself questions about the things that you just learned. Make sure that you are recalling the stuff as you move through it. Now, some people recall at the chapter end. I recall every couple of paragraphs. I find if I don't recall every couple of paragraphs, I wind up kind of, my brain disappears and I kind of just like, I'm at the end of the chapter and I'm like, what happened? So at the end of every couple of paragraphs, I actually talk to my duck and I say to my duck everything I just learned. And that active recall enables me to do a quarter of the work, but get better results. A lot of folks come to RC with not the best study habits. I did not have good study habits until I learned all this stuff. I used to take copious notes that I would never read again that helped me do nothing. It was all very low cognitive effort. Active recall is a high cognitive effort process. It helps all the connections in your brain form, and it actually helps you remember this information for the long term. Now, we're generally forgetful creatures. And so individuals will most likely forget all the things that they learn. This is a experiment with a sample size of 1, but it has been repeated a little bit. But what this person did is they gave themselves a 3-letter code. So just like 3 letters. And what they found is that after 20 minutes, there was like an almost 40% chance they had forgotten that 3-letter code. And if you look at the end of 31 days, there was almost an 80% chance that they had forgotten that 3-letter combo. And so this goes to show us that even if we put in all this time to learn, there's a good chance that we'll forget. And we are here for this to be our career for the rest of our lives, maybe, right? And so this is a cumulative career. We have to build off of the things that we've learned in the past, and we can't forget them. So the beautiful thing is you can actually reset your forgetting curve. You can flatten it. And the way you can flatten your forgetting curve is through spaced repetition. This idea that every so often, every day, in my case, you review the things that you've already learned. And when you start to review the things that you've already learned, the window that it takes for you to forget gets shorter and shorter, longer and longer and longer. Eventually, you're at the point where you'll just never forget material. Our students use a tool called Anki for this, ANKI. It's a completely free tool. It's like flashcards, but there's an algorithm behind it. And these flashcards with the algorithm behind it show you the card at the appropriate time, right as you might start to forget it. And so as you're learning at Resilient Coders, you're going to be creating a lot of Anki cards. Everything that you learn goes into a card, and you review those cards every day. Back when I was commuting into the office before we went remote, my ride on the T or the subway was spent reviewing my Anki cards every single morning, at least 30 minutes a day, spent going through those cards so I don't forget things in the long run. Just these 2 techniques, active recall and spaced repetition. If you just turn off the video now, please, whatever you learn going forward, employ these 2 techniques, because it will help you learn more and it will help you not forget the things that you learn. All right. You can also see here, this is another one of Ali Abdaal's wonderful videos where it shows kind of what spaced repetition can do in terms of how well you're able to remember things. So you can see, like, if we just study it once, we're not going to really remember things. But if we do spaced repetition, we're going to really remember things. But what I really like is that, notice that recalling once was better than massed repetition. So like, let's say you read a chapter and then you just reread that chapter a bunch of times, and then like you never recall it later on, right? That actual sitting there and rereading multiple times is actually less effective than reading it once and then recalling. I love that that's just slightly higher. But the other cool thing is that you're seeing is that even if you like reread or redid yourself a couple of times in a row in one session, that pales in comparison to reviewing across multiple sessions. Cool. Alrighty, so you all are hopefully signing up to be software engineers, and you know that the Resilient Coders Bootcamp focuses on full stack web development. So in this essence, you're here to be web developers. And so the question I always like to start off asking folks is, well, what the heck is the web? If you're all here to be web developers, well, what is the web? And folks will throw out all the wildest things. Folks will throw out anything from cat photos to the pasta. I don't know. Everything comes up when I ask this question. But I really like to start off by thinking of the internet as a wire. Let me select black here. We're going to start off with a wire. And on this wire, are going to be two kinds of devices. We're going to have client side devices, and we're going to have server side devices. Now, client side devices are the devices that we use to consume this internet, right? Or to use the internet. And so client side devices are things like your mobile phone, your laptop, your desktop, heck, whatever you're watching me on right now, that is a client side device. And what client side devices do is they make requests to our servers. And servers are just computers out there on the internet, right? And so the servers are able to hear the requests we make from our client side devices and respond with certain types of information. Typically, they'll respond with files, right? I like to think of this process of the client and server kind of like you're at a restaurant, right? You sitting at a restaurant, you're sitting at the table. Your table is the client side device, right? You're sitting at the table, and you're going to make requests to the kitchen. The kitchen will hear those requests and send you back some food. That's what's happening here between our client side devices and our servers. And so we do this process probably all day long, where we're making these requests and getting these responses. And so what I want to do is I want to break down these requests and these responses so we can understand a little bit more about what is going on. So I always like to pretend that I'm going to order pizza from Domino's. I'm no longer allowed to order pizza from Domino's. It's a long story. I'll tell you the story. When you're walking down the street and the Domino's delivery guy pulls over, grips you up, says, "Leon, how you doing?" and you're not ordering pizza, well, that's the exact moment where you're no longer allowed to order Domino's pizza. So I'm going to use my client side device, and I'm going to pretend to make a request to Domino's server. And so I would go to Domino's.com. My wife's on the other side of this wall, so I'm not about to play. And you know, we're gonna keep this between us. I'm gonna type in Domino's.com. I would hit enter. As soon as I hit enter on Domino's.com in the browser of my phone, that request leaves my client side device and finds its way over to Domino's server. Now, Domino's hears that I am asking for a pizza. The alarm bells are going off. The confetti's falling from the sky. They're going to be able to send their kids to college finally, right? But that server, that computer that's out there on the internet, that's out there on that wire, hears that request, and it can start to generate some responses. And what it wants to do is it wants to send me back their website. And so it's going to send me back some files. And the files it's going to send back are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files, right? We made the request. We typed in Domino's.com on our client side device. That request went across the internet to Domino's server, which is like their computer out there on the internet. Domino's server heard that request and responded with all these files that I can now see on my client side device. So something to ask yourself is like, hey, what if you wanted to open a Word document, right? What if you wanted to open a Word document? Well, if you wanted to open a Word document, you would use Microsoft Word. But what if you wanted to open a PDF? Well, you might use Adobe to open a PDF. Well, the cool thing is that our browsers that run on our client side devices like Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Internet Explorer, they're really good at opening these three types of files: the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript. So if you've ever gone to Domino's website, it's a great website. On that website, you would see a big pizza at the top and a list of ingredients. All that content that you can see, that's powered by HTML. So if you've ever been to a website and you saw content, that was HTML. Now, get a little hungry here. You look at the list of the ingredients. The peppers were green, the ham was pink, the pineapple was yellow. That color, that style, it was centered, that positioning. That's all powered by a technology called CSS, right? So you went to a website, you saw something, HTML. It didn't look like a hot dumpster fire. It looked good. That was CSS. And then the last thing, the coup de grace, the most amazing thing I've ever seen on the internet, is that on Domino's site, you could drag the ingredients onto the pizza. Right? You could drag the ingredients on the pizza, that behavior, that interaction that's powered by JavaScript. So all three of these technologies combine to build all the websites that you use on your client side device. And so the beautiful thing is, if you are an engineer that focuses on the code that runs on the client side device, you might call yourself, well, you would call yourself a front end web developer. Now, if you were an engineer that worked on the code that ran on the server, remember, the server was listening for our requests. It might store our order into a database. It might need to process our credit card. If you're an engineer that focuses on writing the code that runs on the server, you might call yourself a back-end web developer. An engineer that does both, writes code for the front end, the client-side device, and the back end, the server, we call them full stack web developers. And that's what we teach at Resilient Coders. You are all here to be full stack web developers. Over 20 weeks, we will teach you the basics of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, all the stuff that is going to run on the client side. Then we're going to teach you Node and MongoDB, the code that runs on the server side. And by the end, you will be able to build full stack web applications where individuals can log in, they can submit orders, they can do amazing stuff. And with those skills, you can get a high paying, happy job. And so that's what that's the goal. That's what we're trying to get you towards. And there are a lot of steps in between this. We could spend our whole career kind of talking about what happens when the request leaves the client and goes to the server. We can talk a lot about kind of the security around all this stuff. Lots of goodies that we get into right in the first week of class. And so if you do join the bootcamp, I'm really excited to spend more time on this with you. But what I want to do is I want to move into HTML. Let's talk about that first technology, the one that helps us see content. Let's start there. Alrighty. Have you ever heard of HTML5 before? Maybe you have, because we're on the 5th version of HTML. Now, back in the day, we had what were called the browser wars, where every browser wanted to own the internet. And so you would write HTML for one browser and it just wouldn't work in another. And so Sir Tim Berners-Lee rode in on his white horse and built the W3C, or the World Wide Web Consortium. It's a group of folks that come together to set the standard for what the internet and what HTML should look like going forward. At first, no one listened to them, but after 10 or 11 years, they were able to rally support and set the specification, or what HTML should look like in the browser. And with HTML5, we got a lot of new stuff. If you've ever been able to watch a YouTube video in the browser on your phone, that's HTML5 video. If you go back a few years, we had things like Flash and Silverlight that were required to watch those videos in the browser. And if you're a triple OG like myself, back in the day, I had a separate program on my computer just to watch videos. So it wasn't even built into the browser. Like I would click a video and it would like open another program on my computer, right? And so we've come a long way in terms of HTML, and with HTML5, we got native video built directly into the browser. If you ever listen to like Spotify or SoundCloud in the browser, that's HTML5 audio. If you ever played any of the IO games like Agar.io, Slither.io, those are you taking advantage of the canvas with HTML5. They're also not real multiplayer games. I just learned this not too long ago. If you turn off the Wi-Fi, they still work the exact same way. Mind blown. If you've ever been to a website and it asks you for your location, before we used to do really shady stuff to figure out where you're coming from, sniff your IP address and all this weird stuff. But now you can just give us your location. That's really helpful for a lot of businesses. And then the last thing is, if you ever spent a late night talking about chat roulette, if you ever spent a late night on chat roulette or Omegle talking about politics, you have used HTML5 as well. So all this new stuff that's come down the pipeline as the web has progressed. Now, here is the most important thing I will cover in this video. the most important technical topic that we will cover, and it's the golden rule or separation of concerns. Let me say that again. Most important topic that we'll cover and most important technical topic that we will cover, separation of concerns. And the reason why this is so important is because it helps us to be organized with ourselves or with other engineers. And so the separation of concerns, this rule means that all of our content, like the stuff that we see on a site, should be in our HTML. And all the stuff that we see style wise, the color, the positioning, that should all be in our CSS. And then all the stuff behavior wise, that dragging, that dropping, that should be written in our JavaScript. And we want to keep these technologies and files separate. We don't want to mix them into each other, so that we know where to go when it comes time to work on these different pieces of our project. If I was working with you, another engineer, and I said, hey, I want you to go make this green, where are you going to go? Hopefully you would go to the CSS, right? The CSS is what handles color, style. And so right away, we've been working together for 30 seconds. We already know how to work together as engineers because we're both adhering to this very important rule of separation concerns. We both know where to go when it comes time to make changes. Cool. Now, HTML is the first language that we learn at Resilient Coders. It is a markup language, meaning that's not necessarily a true programming language, but HTML and CSS enable us to build out the basics of our websites. All the stuff that we see, all the positioning, the color that comes from CSS, just with HTML and CSS, we're able to build really great stuff. And so HTML is handling all of our content. Every bit of content on the page must be wrapped in tags. So when it comes to HTML, what you're going to see are opening tags and closing tags. And the opening and closing tags really only differ in like two ways. One, the closing tag always has this lovely /, and our opening tags sometimes can have attribute value pairs. These attribute value pairs give superpowers to our HTML tags. We're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. So when you're writing HTML, the content for your websites, you want to make sure that every bit of content is wrapped in a tag. Now, all of the spelling, the grammar rules, the idea of tags and things like that, all of that we call syntax. When we're dealing with languages, we call them syntax. The spelling and grammar rules for our different markup and programming languages, we will call that syntax. HTML has its own syntax, CSS has its own syntax, JavaScript has its own syntax, and we'll see that each new language we learn will do things differently and have its own syntax. Cool. Let's go ahead and actually start coding a little bit. I want to show you a Resilient Coders mission page and show you how we can start making actual code. So if we look, here is a Resilient Coders mission page, and there is a lot of content. And so the first mandate when you're writing HTML is that all of your content must be wrapped in tags. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wrap all of this content in tags. So at the top, I see Resilient Coders mission. To me, this is the most important thing on the page. And so when you have something that's the most important, you wrap that in the H1 tag. So you can see that I open my tag and then I'm going to close my tag. I have an opening tag H1 and a closing tag H1. Now don't worry about knowing all the different tags. We're going to cover all the big ones together, like the most important ones together. But this H1 signifies that this is the most important content on the page. All right. Next, I have a big block of text. If you were ever to see a big block of text in a newspaper or a book, what would you call that big block of text? Well, I would call it paragraph. So I have this lovely P tag that opens, and then I have a lovely P tag. I have a lovely P tag that I'm going to use to close. All right. So paragraph opened, paragraph closed. Next, I have a bunch of locations from Boston, Philly, and Pittsburgh, right? If you're looking at these bunch of locations, you might say we have a what? We would have a list. And so this list really doesn't matter the order. If I put one location before the other, make it a little pissed at me, but it doesn't have to be in a particular order. Things that have to be in a particular order would be things like a recipe, right? If you're trying to make great brownies and you're mixing, like you're putting the eggs on the pan, you're throwing the mix on top, you're putting it in the oven. Once it comes out of the oven, then you stir, like you're going to wind up with really bad brownies. So a recipe has to be in a specific order. This is just a regular old list, and we have what we call an unordered list for that, or a UL. So my UL opens, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap this at the bottom. Cool. And I'm just going to give myself a little room here so my head's not in the way. But now I have this lovely list, right? It opens and it closes. But if you had any other kind of list, like if you had, like, let's say a grocery list, you have things that go on that list. You would have grocery items. And so each one of these are items in my unordered list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap each one of these in an LI, or list item. And it's a tag that you use for items that go in your list. And so I'm going to wrap each one of these in an LI. So I'm going to open my LI. I'm going to jump to the end. I'm going to close my LI. And what you just saw was a little bit of developer magic. The reason why I use a text editor like VS Code, what you're seeing right now, is that I can do stuff like that. Very quick, very efficient. And when you join the Resilient Coders Bootcamp, I'll teach you all my secrets. Cool. So let me go ahead, and right now this page is not saved. I can actually tell because this circle up here at the top is bright and round. And so when I actually do Command S or file save, you can see that the page is saved. Great. We got another paragraph down here, because I can see it's a big block of text. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my P tag. And then I'm going to go over here and close my P tag. Wonderful. And this all looks good, except if we reread, it says, learn how to get more involved as a mentor here. Learn more about how to get involved as a mentor here. What does that here mean? Like, what does that sound like to you? To me, that sounds like a link. Like I want to take them somewhere. And we actually have another tag for that. It's called an anchor tag. An anchor tag is just another name for a link, like where we're going to actually send them. So I open my anchor tag and I close my anchor tag. And the only other thing that we're missing is that our anchor tags need to have one of those attribute value pairs that we talked about. So href equals, and then we can go ahead and put in the site where we want to send them. So https resilientcoders.org. Beautiful, right? So now if we go back and look, every bit of content is wrapped in a tag. I'm going to go ahead and save my page. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this in the browser. So I'm going to go ahead and open this in the browser. And we're going to see some stuff right off the bat. We're going to see that Resilient Coders' mission is big, bold, black, and beautiful, much like myself. But there's something interesting about this being big, bold, black, and beautiful. What's interesting about that? What handles making something big? What handles making something bold? That all sounds like style or CSS. Did we write any CSS? No. And so this is something we have to keep in mind, is that the browser wars are still alive and well. This is default styling coming from the browsers. And it's going to be one of the first things we have to handle when we move to writing CSS, kind of like getting rid of all the default styling, because we didn't write any CSS yet. Still some style came through. And so that leads us to a really important concept, that is, as you're writing your HTML, you should not care what it looks like. It doesn't care if it looks good, if it looks bad. It doesn't matter if it's upside down, right? So it just does not matter, because when it comes to making something look good, you use CSS. So if you're just writing HTML, you gotta fight the urge to care what it looks like. And you never pick HTML based on what it's gonna look like. You always pick your HTML based on two things. One, how important it is, and two, the semantic meaning of that element. Basically, every HTML tag, all the ones I'm about to show you, have a meaning or a reason why you would use them. And so you always use that reason or why, not how it looks. You can always change how things look when we get to CSS. Cool. So let's talk about some tag. And I don't mean this type of tag. This tag's pretty cool though. This is the World Tag Championship. And it's a bunch of parkour artists that jump around and try and play tag. And I just know I would slip and break my neck within the first 10 seconds, but it's pretty cool to watch. It was a big YouTube rabbit hole for me for a while. All right. I believe it's called World Chase Tag. So got a free weekend. Watch out. All right. Here are some tags that I really want to talk about. HTML tags. The first tags I like to introduce you to are called heading elements. These are elements that are going to describe content that comes after. So think of like a newspaper where you have like a headline, and that headline describes the article that comes after. And so that's what these elements are used for. We have H1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s. These only go up to 6, and they're really the only elements that have numbers. Nothing else will have numbers going forward. And what they are just headings. They're headlines that describe the content that comes after, but we pick them based on how important that headline is, right? That's my dog Simba, if you just heard him. He really, really enjoys heading elements. And so an H1 is supposed to be the most important heading on the page. You go to that page, the most important thing should be wrapped in an H1. So if it's the most important, you're probably only going to ever actually really have one H1. Like caveat HTML5, you can now have one H1 per section, but we get ahead of ourselves here. Think about the most important content on your page should be the H1. Then as you go through other headings of less importance, you move to the 2s, to the 3s, to the 4s, to the 5s. Eventually you're getting into things that are just really not that greatly important, but they're still headings, and you're at your H6s. Cool. Now what we saw is that the H1 made it big, bold, black, and beautiful. We don't pick our H1s based on how big they are. We pick them based on how important that content is. If somebody comes to this site, I want them to know that this is the Resilient Coders mission page. Cool. We have some other elements that are important for us to learn. Paragraphs are for big blocks of text. You're familiar with paragraphs from books and magazines. Same thing in HTML. Spans are for short pieces of text, like less than a sentence. Free tags are an abomination and you shouldn't use them. What a pre-tag is any white space you have in your HTML, your carriage returns, your enters, your spaces, that carries over into your site. I just don't like them because that sounds too much like what? Sounds too much like CSS to me, too much like style, positioning. I want CSS to handle all that, so I don't like it. And I have some opinions because, well, I'm an engineer and I've lost some friends over my opinions, including this stuff right here. I like to call these nerd fights. I've honestly, most people don't believe me when I bring this up, have lost a friend over the BR tag and the HR tag. What a BR tag does is it puts a little bit of space. An HR tag puts a little bit of line. To me, that is clearly style. With CSS, I can put space all day. I can put border all day. And so you can never convince me that these tags are not style and it should be deprecated. We shouldn't use them anymore. They don't have a place in HTML. Well, I was at a meetup with a friend, drinking some free beer and pizza, as one does at tech meetups, and we're a little into it. And yeah, we had some words. I didn't think that they should be in HTML. They thought they did. They didn't see them as style. And was I right and them wrong, or them wrong and I right? Not really, but were we both nerds at the end of the day? Yes. And this is actually something that I encourage my students to do early on, is to form strong opinions, but hold them weakly. The best engineers I work with form strong opinions. They know the reason why they're using the tags that they're using. They know the reason why they're choosing the different heading elements. But if somebody presents a better argument, they acquiesce and go with the better tag. Alrighty, we have some tags that can be confusing at first. If you look at an M tag, it actually makes your text look italicized. If you look at a strong tag, it actually makes the text look bold. So you could say to yourself, wait a minute, Leon, you just said we shouldn't choose tags based on how they look. And that's true. The default styling for an M tag is italicizing, and the default styling for a strong tag is bolding. And if you use those tags because you want that kind of styling, you have violated separation of concerns and you've done the wrong thing. However, we don't use those tags for those things. That's just the default behavior that we can get rid of with CSS. The reason why we use M and strong tags is because they help individuals that are using assisted devices. So individuals that might be using things like screen readers, when they come to your site, they might not be able to see the sign that says sale with the flashing yellow and red lettering, right? But if we put that sale sign inside of an M or a strong tag, that's something that an assisted device would pick up and able to alert them that there is a sale. And so this brings up a really important topic. When you are building out these sites, you really have three different kinds of users you should be keeping in mind. General users that are just going to have a better experience when you use the appropriate tags, like your site's just going to work. Assisted device users that if you're not choosing the right HTML tags, they're not going to be able to move through your content using something like a screen reader. And then the last person is Google or screen crawlers that are trying to rank your site in the search engine results. If you don't choose the right tags, they're not going to be able to figure out what your site is about, and they won't render you in the search engine. So general device users, assisted device users, and search crawlers are people that you need to take into account, and the reason why choosing the right HTML tags are important. We saw an unordered list. The sibling to an unordered list is the ordered list. This would be things for like a recipe, right? Where the actual order of the items matters, or directions where the actual order of items matters. The sibling, the unordered list, it's a list of items like a grocery list where it just doesn't matter the order. I have found out recently that some people like plan out their grocery list based on how they're going to move through the grocery store. You're doing too much. Maybe then your grocery list wouldn't be an unordered list, to be an ordered list, but I don't know. That's a little too much for me. And then we had some really important elements with HTML5. If you look at any older tutorials, you're probably going to see a lot of divs. And using divs is not wrong. It's just that there are a lot more semantic choices now. And semantic choices just mean like there's more of a reason to use the other tags than there are to use divs. And so if you're looking at a tutorial and it's using a lot of divs and it's not like a React tutorial, run. So with HTML5, we got sections, articles, asides, headers, and footers. Sections are kind of the almost a replacement for a div. They have a little bit more semantic meaning. They're going to help us keep like content together in an area. Article is kind of another containing element that's for content that's meant to be shared. Think blog posts, newspaper articles. Those are all articles. An aside is for ancillary or extra content, things that if you remove from the page still makes sense. So a really good candidate for asides are ads. Header is for content at the beginning of a document. Footer is for content at the end of a document. Notice I didn't say top or bottom because that would be positioning, therefore style, and then for handled by CSS. Now you're saying, Leon, this is a lot. There are a lot of these tags. What if I don't remember them? Well, one, you should active recall after watching this video. Maybe you should add all the things that you just learned to your Anki deck to get your spaced repetition in. And then you should also use a website called the MDN, the Mozilla Developers Network. It is the same people that make the browser Firefox. They put together some amazing documentation for all of these tags. So if there's any tag you don't really understand, you're not really sure when you should use it, how you should use it, the MDN will have amazing examples of each and every single tag that we covered today and all the others that you might want to use. There's about like 30 tags I use pretty frequently. There are way more than that, but it's really kind of the cap that you really need to know to be super productive. Cool. Let's look at some websites. So let's see if our link worked. So we had our here, and what happens when we click on the here? All right, so we got Resilient Coders website. And so the question here I would ask you is, what is the H1 on this page? What's the H1? I'll give you a second to take a peek. Take a sip of my water. Don't forget to hydrate. Cool. Yeah, equity and access to the tech economy would be my H1. Remember, the H1 is the most important content on the page. If you come to RC and this is all you leave with, that was the important thing. So equity and access to the tech economy is the most important thing on this page. Now, some people get confused. They'll go, Leon, it's the biggest. No, remember, we don't choose our HTML elements based on size. That's all CSS. So to me, this is the most important. It describes the rest of the page. So that's an H1. Then we have like a big block of text. So like a paragraph, right? Let's scroll down a little bit. Our mission. What do you think that would be? Our mission. What do you think that would be? To me, that's an H2. It's less important than the equity and access, but it's still really important. So this to me would be an H2, another paragraph, and we got like a containing element here. And this containing element, or even this containing element too, would be sections. Whenever you see like those big blocked areas, those are gonna be sections. How about meet our students? What would that be to you? Sometimes folks want to jump to like an H3, but to me, meet our students is as equally important as our mission. I want you to come to this page and hire our students. Like that's the whole point of what we do, right? And so our mission and meet our students are of equal importance. So they're going to both be H2s, right? So both H2s, and then probably like another paragraph and probably like another section. And if we scroll a little bit more, in pursuit of progress, now we're getting into like that H3 territory, right? Where it's definitely less important than the previous two headings we've seen. We do have another block of text, so another paragraph. We do have another section. And so like, I don't know, like 80% of this site, maybe a little bit more, can be achieved with just knowing your heading elements, your paragraphs, and your sections, right? So it's not rocket surgery, folks. You learn a few tags here, and you can start to build pretty much any website you've ever seen. And so I really just want you to take it to heart that this stuff, yes, it's hard, but it's not impossible to learn. And you're going to pick it up so quickly. Give yourself a little bit of grace. If this stuff is all brand new to you, it's going to sound like a lot of mumble jumble, but I promise you, the more you put into it, the more you spend with these words and these terms, the easier it gets. And we get lots of practice in our 20 weeks together through RC. All right, now there was this amazing survey that went out, and this amazing survey went out to a lot of engineers, and they asked all these engineers, like thousands of them, where did you get your start as a software engineer? Where do you think most folks got their start as a software engineer? The number one spot was Neopets. Neopets, yes, the like virtual game that used to play back in the day. They had like a store where you could like customize your store and like your pet page and write some HTML. Number two place was MySpace, where you would make your page and write all that old HTML and all the stuff we used to use. Unfortunately, all the fun stuff is now deprecated. Back in the day, I used to make my Harry Potter, Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon fan site. It had stuff blinking, marquees going across the page. Things were bold and eye tags. But all of these things that we used to make those sites are now deprecated because a lot of them were either style or they were behavior interaction, which is handled by JavaScript. And so I bring this up is because you might have actually coded all the way back when. And if anyone ever tries to gatekeep you from this industry of becoming a software engineer, tell them to go kick rocks because they probably got their start on Neopets. I know this was a quick tour. This has been about 50-ish minutes. It really does hopefully give you a taste of what it might be like to be in the classroom with me. I really do like to have fun. I really do like to give lots of examples, lots of hands-on practice. And I really hope that even if you decide not to join RC, that you don't give up on trying to become a software engineer. We're always willing to answer questions, always willing to help. And I hope that you continue with your application, and I hope to see you at the next part of the recruitment process. And like I said, don't let your dreams be dreams. Just go ahead and do it.
Do it! Just do it! So just do it!
All right, folks. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope to see you all very soon. Peace.